From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. Three people have been arrested in Venezuela in connection to the assassination attempt against President Nicolas Maduro in early August. Henry Rivas, Angela Esposita, and an unnamed retired colonel were identified as being behind the failed attack. Communications Minister Jorge Rodriguez said authorities continue to search for two other suspects connected to the attack. The government has asked Chile, Colombia, and Mexico to investigate if any of their embassy workers could have been involved.
This attack could have taken us towards a very difficult situation, to serious consequences for the Venezuelan people, to a situation of violence if these criminals would have succeeded in their attack. President Maduro will give the pertinent orders to his foreign minister, Jorge Arreaza, so that these public officials clarify from Chile, Colombia and Mexico their alleged involvement. There's no diplomatic immunity in case of cover-up of terrorists.
A Chinese medical ship has arrived in Venezuela to provide medical support. Chinese healthcare experts will provide assistance and knowledge exchange. This is part of the cooperation agreements President Maduro signed in China during his most recent visit. The Peace Ark boat docked in the port of La Guaira.
They will be here for a week, taking care of patients of all nationalities. People have already shown their interest. The governor tells me that over 1,200 Colombians will be helped here.
Venezuela's Minister of Petroleum, Manuel Quevedo, met with the Secretary General of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Quevedo is in Algeria to attend a meeting of the organization. He says Venezuela wants to strengthen their mechanisms to secure oil prices and that his government wants to promote cooperation to guarantee stability in the oil market. This comes days after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened OPEC countries to lower oil prices.
We want to congratulate these member countries that have worked in this committee. We want to recognize their professionalism and balance. We are satisfied with the results, and we want to continue working hard. And in the year 2019, when Venezuela receives the OPEC presidency, we will continue working to improve the world economy.
Brazil's Workers' Party presidential candidate Fernando Haddad continues his campaign in the city of Recife. Recife is in Pernambuco, the home state of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who Haddad is replacing in the presidential run. Along with Vice Presidential candidate Manuela Diaz Vela, he spoke of the importance of investing in education. And the right-wing candidate Jair Bolsonaro says if he wins the presidency, he will privatize public companies. Bolsonaro says he will reduce the number of ministries. According to his Twitter, he said, quote, "I'm committed to reducing the number of ministries, extinguishing and privatizing a large part of the state companies that exist today. These are unnecessary expenses that should not be going to the people." Our correspondent in Brazil, André Vieira, has been following the campaign trail, and he brings us this update.
Fernando Haddad,
the Workers' Party candidate, has intensified his campaign with the help of social organizations. He's made it clear to the public that he will follow in the footsteps of the acclaimed Lula da Silva. The polls show that he's in second place to win after the right-wing candidate Jair Bolsonaro. That's why Haddad has stepped up his campaign to highlight how bad a win for the right would be for the country. On Sunday, Haddad visited the border of Pernambuco and Bahia to reinforce ties with the working class who have been marginalized by the right wing. Fernando Haddad has pledged to do away with neoliberal policies the government implemented. The election is set to take place on the 7th of October.
We thank Andrea Vieira for that report. One person died during clashes between police and government supporters at a demonstration in Nicaragua. Firing tear gas and rubber bullets, authorities cracked down on hundreds of pro-government supporters in the capital, Managua. According to the police, one person was killed and many wounded in the crossfire between demonstrators and residents. The demonstration was being held to demand the release of imprisoned protesters. And in Colombia, another social leader has been killed. Campesino leader Carmen Elizabeth Tintinago was killed in the municipality of Sotada. Her name is being added to the more than 2,000 social leaders killed since the government and the FARC signed a peace agreement. Social organizations are urging the authorities to protect their leaders, as 164 have been killed this year alone. Our correspondent, Jose Manuel Jimenez, reports on the latest developments in some of these cases.
Saludos a ustedes y a los televidentes. Efectivamente, la situación para los líderes sociales y
Indeed, the situation for social leaders and human rights defenders is one of permanent danger across the country. We are talking about more than 165 leaders killed in 2018 in different regions such as the department of Meta and Cauca, Mariño and Antioquia. In this last department in 2018, there have been already 27 assassinated leaders and also 22 leaders who have been forced from their homes. In addition, there are 4,200 people displaced because of the armed groups like the Clan of the Gulf and the Carrapatos, self-defense Gaitanists of Colombia, the Águilas Negras, and also armed groups working for the Mexican cartels seeking to take over land. According to CODES, 38,000 people have been forcibly displaced in 2018, a humanitarian crisis not being addressed by the government. President Iván Duque, in his workshop Building Countries in New York City, discussed the issue and the future of negotiations with the LNN. According to the government, negotiations are frozen until the group meet all conditions laid out by the administration. He also touched on how to combat narco-trafficking through rules and guiltiness raised by the US government. He discussed the situation in Venezuela and the advance of strategy using policy, economy and social pressure to remove President Nicolás Maduro. However, he did not make time to talk about the 38,000 displaced people in the country and more than 165 leaders killed during 2018.
Social organizations and human rights activists in Colombia are also urging the authorities to safeguard the lives of journalists. We have more in this report.
The last 2 years has registered the highest number of social leaders killed. Violence is also threatening the lives of journalists around the country.
In September, we received a threat for some investigations we published. It was footage of the paramilitary and information on the false positive case that involves the paramilitary as well as military personnel. This worries us because this case was presented in a court of the special jurisdiction for peace.
According to press freedom organization FLIP, the threats and murders of social leaders have rose. 59 cases of threats were presented in 2015, 90 in 2016, and 129 in 2017.
The same people that are threatening the fight of social leaders are also threatening campesinos, indigenous people, and the youth. They're also preventing people from fighting for their rights and preventing journalists to report on this conflict.
Member of the Commission of Safety Guarantees, Franklin Castañeda, says that even though this new government has promoted different dialogue tables to resolve the situation, no measure has been taken to tackle violence.
There have been spaces of dialogue between civilians and the state. The international community has monitored this dialogue and have asked for measures to protect social leaders and defenders.
Social movements are taking their own measures to protect the lives of leaders and journalists and guarantee their work.
We are promoting self-protection. We are doing this through knowing our territory and promoting the relations with our people. We are guaranteeing our rights.
According to the non-governmental organization, in the past, the presence of armed groups in the country has rose. Paramilitary groups reported to be in Antioquia, Arauca, Atlántico, Bolívar, Boyacá, Caldas, Cauca, Cesar, and Córdoba. Meanwhile, the Pelusos armed group and the National Liberation Army control Santander and the north of Santander.
Our biggest fear is that people from the intelligence services are linked to these groups. We don't understand how certain people are threatened and others are protected. There's no evidence of who is behind these threats.
Journalists, social leaders, and human rights organizations say that the government does not know who these groups are and how they operate. President Duque said he was committed to fight violence. However, until now, the government has not met with civilians, social movements, or human rights organizations.
We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
We are always there tracking the news. We seek equality. We defend the truth. It's a hard job, but we are not alone. We count on a new ally.
Welcome back. Peru's Attorney General has opened a new investigation against former President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. He's being investigated for alleged vote buying to try to prevent his impeachment. The Attorney General is accusing Kuczynski and other lawmakers of bribery. The former president said after resigning that accusations of his vote buying were, quote, a big lie. Chile insists it won't negotiate any part of its territory with Bolivia. This comes a week before the International Court of Justice will decide on Bolivia's dispute to regain access to the Pacific. Chilean Foreign Minister Roberto Amparo says his country will maintain the borders that were established in the Treaty of 1904. But Bolivia says dialogue is the only option to end the dispute. Foreign Minister Diego Pare is confident his country has presented a solid case to the court in The Hague. Bolivia argues that Chile has not kept its diplomatic promises to negotiate sea access, namely a land corridor and a port under Bolivian control. People in Argentina have started bartering or exchanging goods as they look for creative ways to sustain themselves as the economic crisis worsens. As prices skyrocket due to inflation, residents of Monte Grande in the province of Buenos Aires began bartering or buying products in bulk since the beginning of 2018. Basic food prices have surged to more than double. Inflation will likely reach 30% by the end of September.
The group is big because the need is big. What we do is exchange what we don't use, and even what we do use for food, for merchandising, wherever it is oil, meat, sugar, or whatever.
A state of emergency has been declared in parts of Jamaica's capital city. Prime Minister Andrew Holness made the announcement on Sunday. The state of emergency will last initially for 14 days. He says this is being done to address long-standing issues related to crime and public safety.
A state of public government considers it necessary to use the extraordinary powers provided for within the state of public emergency to address long-standing and entrenched crime and public order issues which have threatened lives, indeed taken lives, curtailed businesses, undermined the rule of law, and have deprived citizens their general right to live peacefully and enjoy a good quality of life.
Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival officially launched on Sunday. The actual festival will take place on the 4th and 5th of March 2019. This launch serves to signal the marketing campaign for the festival, which has spawned copycats throughout the world. But the chairman of the National Carnival Commission warned the festival is losing its place as the leader of the West Indian-style carnival. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang says his country is ready to enhance cooperation with the Caribbean community, or CARICOM. Wang said that both parties share common interests. He added their cooperation represents a vital part of their ties with Latin America. China will provide these countries with assistance within the framework of the South-South participation. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Port-au-Prince on Sunday to demand an inquiry into the alleged misuse of funds set aside as part of the Petrocaribe program. The Petrocaribe program was put in place by the late Venezuelan president Hugo Chavez, and it allowed participating countries to purchase cheap petroleum products and the ability to pay their bills over an extended period of time at a 1% interest rate. Earlier Haitian investigations into the misuse of nearly $2 billion pointed to several ministers of the current ruling party, but none have been brought to justice. And in Guatemala, fishermen are suffering because of an accord issued by the Agriculture Ministry prohibiting fishing in Lake Izaba. The affected are now stranded without state support nor any source of income.
There are more than 600 fishermen affected by a ministry accord that bans all fishing for 45 days in Lake Izabal.
The problem we have is that we are banned, and I don't know how are we going to sustain ourselves. I don't know what happened with the authorities that committed to a meeting. They didn't fulfill the offer.
Ministry Accord 72, 2018, issued by the Agricultural Ministry, was enforced on September 15th with the goal of improving the reproductive process of species in the lake.
This law bans active fishing. Then how are we and our children going to survive? Pay for their studies. Every family that works on the lake depend on it to survive.
They argue that since the accord was enforced, hundreds of fishermen have been abandoned without any opportunity to work.
There's some companies, but they don't accept people from Esther. Only people from other cities. This is why we cannot stop fishing. Where else are we going to get our money to support our children?
Some don't want to put their fishing gear into storage because they are worried about not being able to pay their debts.
There are some fishermen that have a debt with the bank. They bought their nets, canoes, engines, fishing equipment.
For the fishermen, this prolonged ban is another state onslaught. They already face criminalization for fighting the coastal mining contamination in Lake Izabal.
We'll take another short break now. Join us in a few.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. A new round of tariffs between China and the United States come into effect on Monday as the trade war between the world's two largest economies escalates. The U.S. tariffs will affect Chinese products such as food seasoning, baseball gloves, and parts for industrial machinery. On the other hand, U.S.-made chemicals, clothes, and car parts will be subject to Chinese levies. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned tariffs could increase to 25% by January 1st unless the U.S. and China reach a trade deal. And China published a white paper on Monday to clarify facts about the China-U.S. economic relations. And this was done to show its stance on the issue and their pursuance of reasonable solutions. The paper says that the countries are at different stages of their development and have different economic systems. Therefore, trade friction at some level is only natural. However, it goes on to say that the America First stance of the U.S. administration has abandoned the fundamental norms of mutual respect and equal consultation that guide international relations. Russia's defense ministry has accused Israel of infringing upon an agreement between the two nations when it conducted an attack on Syria without informing Moscow in advance. A Russian aircraft was downed by Israeli forces, killing 15 soldiers on September 17th. The Ministry of Defense said that there was also a civilian passenger flight using that airspace at the time, and therefore they too were potentially at risk.
The objective data represented indicate that it was an action by the Israeli combat pilots that led to the death of 15 Russian soldiers. It shows their lack of professionalism or a criminal negligence. Therefore, we believe that the blame for the tragedy of the Russian Tu-20 rests completely on the Israeli Air Force and on those who made such decisions.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has accused the United States of providing financial and military support for anti-government groups in Iran. The armed groups are believed to be behind an attack on a military parade in the city of Avaz, in which 25 people died. Rouhani called the United States a bully who wants to create insecurity in the Islamic Republic.
The small puppet countries that we see in the region are backed by America. The United States is provoking them and giving them necessary capabilities to commit these crimes.
The British Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn called for the termination of arms sales to the Saudi-led coalition while speaking at a fringe meeting of the Labour Party's annual conference in Liverpool on Sunday.
Whilst I obviously want us to send all the aid necessary to deal with the consequences of the war and the bombing, the best thing to do is stop the war altogether, and to start that by ending our supply of arms to the Saudi coalition that is undertaking that bombardment.
18 people, including 14 civilians, have been killed in a rebel attack in North Kivu in the Eastern Democratic Republic near the border with Uganda. North Kivu is one of the most populated areas of the DRC. It is home to a number of armed groups that kill and abduct civilians. The Benai region is under siege from the Allied Defense Forces, the ADF, an Islamic rebel group blamed for hundreds of civilian deaths over the past 4 years. Other armed elements, including members of the Congolese army, may also be to blame.
My sister was hurt. She was shot 5 times in the upper jaw. I saw there 5 wounded soldiers and 26 bodies. I saw that bodies had gotten out of a military van and then brought to the morgue.
The Kenyan film Rafiki has been shown for the first time in Nairobi in the middle of a controversial censorship ban. The movie that tells the love story of 2 women was allowed to be screened for a week after being banned for several months. The LGBTI community celebrated the screening and said it was a step towards ending discrimination.
I'm so excited that we've been finally allowed to watch it. It's been a year and a half. We filmed last year and we were so excited, really want to watch it. But now, I'm so glad the ban has been lifted, even if it's just for a week. But a week can move into a month, into a year. And even from the crowd that is here, you already see everybody is so excited about watching this movie.
I think it's great that the ban was lifted for the movie to be shown. I think it shows progressiveness, or the fact that we're moving into the right direction.
And finally, for the autumn equinox, China celebrated the first National Harvest Festival to recognize the role of farmers. Farmers make up the majority of the Chinese population. For the last 5 years, grain output has remained stable at 600 million tons per year. Farmers' incomes have continued to grow since 2012 due to governmental support for rural development and efforts to reduce poverty. In addition to Beijing, 6 major agricultural lands across the country also stage hundreds of events to mark the festival. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you should join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you for watching.